Hello, everybody. Let's get this camera. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, I was waiting for the notifications to go out, at least on Facebook, and it looks like it's moving rather slow. So I'm just going to hang out here for a minute because I know that a lot of people are just now getting their notifications. I'll go ahead and get this shared. And it looks like we do have two people in here already. So hello, hello, hello. If you are new here, my name is Mother Della Mort, and you are tuning into the Horror Gallery. We are going to be going over mass hysteria and group delusion tonight. And this will be my last broadcast for the spring season. And you know what that means? That means just a couple of more months until spooky season and when things really, really kick into gear for us here. So we always take a little bit of time to take a break and get ready for that. So again, welcome to the show. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you share out. That is absolutely the easiest and freest way to show support for your streamers is to share. Absolutely free. And if you'll notice right up here, we have the little QR code, and you can just take a little click on that, and yeah, it'll take you right to our website. And our website has all kinds of features, all kinds of things to offer. It's got a lot of really cool stuff, as well as our recommendations. So yeah, pick out a book there. A lot of them aren't very expensive, and that helps us on the back end, being that we are Amazon affiliates. So yeah. So let's just hang out here for a moment and see how long it takes for people to start coming in. Let's see. Alrighty. Okie doke. Let's see if we can put some in here. So yeah, grab your popcorn, come on in, say hello when you're here. And we'll get started here in just a minute. I'm not going to rush this one. Even though we have a lot to unpack tonight, some really interesting stories that I found related to mass hysteria and collective delusions that have happened in the past, and they're not that uncommon. So do that. I'm going to give everybody just a couple more minutes. I usually start about 5 after. Let's see, where am I going? This one. That. All right. Okay. All right. Let's see what we've got going on here. Yes. All right. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I don't know what is going on with the notifications, but you can always catch this on the replay. All right. Okay. So mass hysteria or collective delusion outbreaks can be found throughout recorded history. One of the most famous examples is the Salem witch trials of 1692. But there are other stories that don't get as much attention. In 2012, a student at Leroy High School in upstate New York began exhibiting twitching and convulsions, and soon after, dozens of other students followed suit. What had started as a mental symptoms, basically, eventually wound up expressing themselves physically, which often happens in these types of situations. Now, the events are known as sociogenic illnesses, and they are rooted in long-standing stresses and worries within a community or within a person. But when we talk about mass hysteria, this is something that kind of spreads to other people. And they typically worsen over time before suddenly exploding into a contagious outbreak. Fortunately, these episodes tend to subside just as quickly as they started. In sociology and psychology, mass hysteria is a phenomenon that transmits collective illusions of threats, whether real or imaginary, through a population and society as a result of rumors and fear. Now, in medicine, the term is used to describe the spontaneous manifestation or production of chemicals in the body of the same or similar hysterical physical symptoms by more than one person. And we're going to kind of get into that a little bit because that does have a name. Oh, and it looks like we're getting some people in here. Hello, Friday Blue. How are you? I hope you are doing well. Let's see if we can pop you up on there. There we go. Hey, Friday, how are you doing? Guys, share out because I do believe that Facebook notifications are acting a little wonky tonight. So let's get back over here. All right, so tonight, just for anybody catching or just now tuning in, we are talking about mass hysteria and collective delusions, which there are a lot of really, really interesting like events that have happened in history. So it's not just something that doesn't happen these days and was somehow just something that happened back, a long time ago or in history. These types of things can happen at any time if the conditions are right. And like I said, it usually has to do with stress within a community, not necessarily like lack of food or anything like that. You could have those kinds of conditions and mass hysteria not break out, but it's just usually a certain level of stress within a community that can cause mass hysteria to kind of exhibit itself. So let's see where we were at. So in medicine, the term is used to describe the spontaneous manifestation or production of chemicals in the body of the same or similar hysterical physical symptoms by more than one person. Now, a common type of mass hysteria occurs when a group of people believe that they have a similar disease or ailment, sometimes referred to as mass sociogenic illness or epidemic hysteria. The story of the Hammersmith ghost panic is a particularly fascinating one. It all began in November of 1803 when reports spread that a ghost had been seen in West London's Hammersmith district. As fear and hysteria swept across London, more and more people stepped forward to talk about their encounters with the ghost. They described it as being incredibly tall, dressed in white with horns and glassy eyes. In response to the sighting, many fearful citizens took up arms and began patrolling the area. Now, while this incident makes for an intriguing tale today, at the time it caused immense fear among locals due to prevalent beliefs about ghost hunting down their victims. Now, on January of 1804, January 3rd, a 29-year-old exercise officer named Francis Smith, he was a member of the armed patrols set up in the wake of the reports, shot and killed bricklayer Thomas Millwood, mistaking the white clothes of Millwood's trade for a shroud of ghostly apparition. Now, the Hammersmith ghost murder case, which basically unfolded because of that, actually set a legal precedent in the UK regarding self-defense, that someone could be held liable for their actions even if the consequences were of a mistaken belief. Now, Smith was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. However, later his sentence was commuted to 1 year's hard labor. Now, oddly enough, the issue surrounding the case was not fully settled for another 180 years until a Court of Appeals decision in 1984. So yeah, I mean, that just tells you, and we've seen it, we've read about it, where a belief in something can cause a certain amount of hysteria to where people just freak out and then people wind up getting hurt. And especially like the Salem witch trials. I mean, that was, of course, I think that was other variables related to that, but there was an element of mass hysteria there, and people were just absolutely terrified of the devil. And we even saw that as recent as the 1980s with the McMartin daycare. That was another case of mass hysteria or mass delusion, even because even though they're technically two different things, they can exhibit very similar types of behavior, but they tend to be referenced as two separate things, but they tend to go hand in hand in a lot of times. So let's see, Friday Blue, I see another comment up there, and she says, let's see, I can't see it on my end when I put it up there. Show. So she says, what did she say? Oh my goodness, this is so hard to work sometimes with the touchpad. She's doing good, and always love to catch Mother Delamore. Well, I am so glad. I'm so glad. All right, let's go back over here. So now we're going to move on to the mewing nuns of France. Now, before the modern era, many outbreaks of mass hysteria occurred within religious institutions. Convents were in particularly prime ground, ripe for eruptions of contagious mass delusion. That was because convents, especially in the medieval days, contained large number of nuns who had been forced into them by their families. Once in, they were compelled to lead lives that many found disagreeable. Now, inside the convents, many of the unfortunate girls or women forced into becoming nuns were confined in prison-like conditions and led a stressful lifestyle that was not of their own choosing. Among other things, the nuns were expected to be celibate and to submit to poverty, hard work, and unquestioning obedience to authority figures who had the right to compel compliance. Now, often they were compelled with coercive measures ranging from the imposition of extra labor to the confinement in cells or withholding food and water. Now, physical chastisement and punishment were also available. This ranged from whipping and caning in house to turning over the most defiant nuns to ecclesiastic courts. If things went particularly bad, they could end up with the hard-headed nun getting burned to death for witchcraft or demonic possession. Now, such conditions of communal long-standing stress and fear are textbook causes for the outbreak of mass hysteria. So it is not surprising that nunneries frequently experience eruptions of mass delusions. One of the more bizarre incidences occurred in a French convent in the Middle Ages. A nun started meowing like a cat, an animal viewed in Europe at the time not as a cute and cuddly pet, but as being associated with Satan. Now, soon other nuns in the convent joined in and started meowing as well. And before long, the whole convent was meowing. It eventually became a chorus-like, with all the nuns joining in collective caterwauling for several hours each day. And I see Calvin here. Hello, Calvin. How are you? I think that the notifications went out kind of very oddly. Like, I got mine about 5 minutes after, and I think other people probably got theirs a little bit later. But anyway, we were talking about mass delusions as well as mass hysteria. All right, so back to the mewing nuns. Now, understandably, the calliope alarmed and upset the neighbors, particularly in the light that cats, like I said, were associated with the devil and demonic possession. Pleas were made for them to stop, but they did not. They did not heed the request. So soldiers were eventually called in order to whip the meowing sisters into silence. Now, that finally did bring the mass hysteria outbreak to an end. But the meowing nuns were not the only outbreak. We also had a case of the biting nuns. Now, again, long-term stress and fears, such as those leading to the meowing nuns, were not unique to that particular convent or to France, but applied throughout the era's Christendom. Across the Rhine from France and Germany, similar stressors led to a mass hysteria outbreak in the 15th century. It began when a nun started biting the other sisters in her convent. Before long, the behavior spread, and the convent was full of crazed nuns running around and biting each other. Now, as described by a 15th century doctor, and I quote, "A nun in a German nunnery fell to biting all her companions. In the course of a short time, all the nuns of this convent began to bite each other. The news of this infatuation among the nuns soon spread, and it now passed convent to convent throughout a great part of Germany, particularly Saxony, and it afterwards visited nunneries of Holland, and at last the nuns had biting mania even as far as Rome." So at this point, you had just random nuns running around and biting people. I know it probably wasn't funny, but for some reason, I don't know, you just think of nuns as being so innocent. Could you imagine being on the streets and all of a sudden a nun just run up and bite you? I just think that's kind of funny. Now, as seen above, the German nuns, mass hysteria did the French ones one better by not being restricted to a single convent. As news of the biting nuns spread, so did the bad habit, and soon other convents throughout Germany were similarly affected. Before long, the mass hysteria went international, and convents, like I said, in the Netherlands and as far north as Holland reported outbreaks of the biting nuns. The hysteria also traveled south and across the Alps into Italy. Now, the authorities were baffled and alarmed and attempted various countermeasures as, and I quote, "the nuns at length worried one another from Rome to Amsterdam." Now, when prayers and masses failed, the church resorted to exorcisms and the casting out of devils and demons, but to no avail. So they resorted to a more basic approach and threatened basically to flog or dunk the nuns into the water, and that would be for any nun who bit another. That worked, and after a few statutory examples were made, the nuns quickly came to their senses and the biting fever rapidly subsided. Now, another case of mass hysteria or collective delusion was the dance plague of 1518. And we talked about this a little bit way back when we did the Pied Piper stream, which was extremely interesting, really going into what may have been the causes behind that particular nursery rhyme. And they're really quite dark, from the village selling their children to some sort of like mass sickness or plague. And it was just, if you get a chance, the stream is still on YouTube. I mean, you could find it here on Facebook, but that's scrolling way back. It'd be much easier to go to my playlist and just find it. But we did cover the dancing plague of 1518. But for those of you that are not familiar, we all get a jingle or tune stuck in our heads every now and then and end up humming and mumbling it nonstop or on and off for hours or days on end. That is bad enough. But what about taking it up a notch? How about a dance move that one can't stop? Almost everyone loves a good shimmy, but what happens if the shimmy is so good that you just can't quit and you end up dancing yourself to death? That is what the people of Strasbourg, in what is now France, discovered in July of 1518, when their town fell into the grip of a dancing mania. Hundreds of people started dancing nonstop for days on end. By the time the dance fever finally broke, and many of the good people of Strasbourg had literally danced themselves to death from heart attacks, strokes, or plain out exhaustion, It began innocently enough one shiny July morning when Frau Toffrey started dancing in the street. Onlookers clapped, laughed, and cheered her high spirits as she danced and danced and danced some more. Now, Tofira danced without rest or respite for 6 days, and within a week, she had been joined by dozens in her marathon dance, mostly at this time women. Alarmed, authorities consulted local physicians who opined that the cause was hot blood. Now, on the theory that the dancers would recover only if they got it out of their system by dancing continuously, musicians were then hired. A wooden stage was erected and additional dancing space was made by opening up guild halls and clearing out a marketplace to make more room. Those measures, however, backfired and simply ended up encouraging even more people to join in the hysteria. Within a month, the number of nonstop dancers had ballooned into hundreds, and at the height of the craze, 15 dancers were dying each day from exhaustion and heart attack. Now, the Strasbourg dancing plague was not an isolated incident, and between the 14th and 17th century, there were enough similar outbreaks for contemporaries to coin a term for the phenomena, and you've probably heard it, the St. Vitus dance or St. John's dance. There is no modern consensus on the cause, so it is simply categorized as an unusual social phenomenon, a mass public hysteria or mass psychogenic illness of unknown provenance. Now, it not only affects adults, but it can very well affect children as well. And so now we're going to cover the girls' school's witchcraft panic. Now, and I'm going to do my best. I am not good at French. Antoinette Bourignon was a pious but mentally unstable 17th century French woman who founded a boarding school for the girls of Lille, France. One day in 1639, when she entered a classroom, Madame Bourignon imagined that she saw a swarm of little black angels flying around the schoolgirls' heads. Alarmed, she told the children to beware the devil, whose little black imps were buzzing all around them. Now, over time, she grew more and more obsessed with the imps, hovering around her wards' heads, and warned the schoolgirls daily to watch out for the devil. Now, soon, the impressionable children came to believe that there were indeed little black demons flying all around them. And before long, Satan and satanic possessions were the sole topic of conversation. One of the girls wound up running away, too scared to stay in school because it was infested with little black devils who might possess her at any moment. Now, as Madame Bourignon and her staff never tired of warning the students, when she was brought back, the girl claimed that she had not run away, but had been carried away by the devil, and that she was now a witch and had been once since she was 7 years old. That absurd babbling by a child kicked off a witchcraft panic that threatened the lives of dozens of children. When the news spread in Madame Bourgnon's school that a student had confessed to being a witch, about 50 other schoolgirls then started having fits. Then they came to say that they joined in a Me Too rush and claimed to be witches as well. In their clamor to confess, the children competed to outdo each other as they described their supposed dark and fell deeds. Some claimed to ride broomsticks. They were taught by others who claimed they could pass through keyholes. There were trumped in turn by other girls claiming that they were feasting on the flesh of babies or attending gatherings of demons. As a result, the formal investigation was launched. Some of Lille's clergy and citizens were skeptical, but most thought that the children's confessions were valid, and that an example should be made by burning all 50 schoolgirls at the stake as witches. Their lives were not only spared after some of the skeptical clergy, aghast at what was about to happen, insisted that the investigators dig in deeper. It was only then that they discovered what the school headmistress had done to fill the girls' heads with the thoughts of demonic possession. The children were absolved, and the blame was then shifted to Madame Bourgnon. She barely escaped punishment after the authorities, unsure of her sanity and tired of the whole affair, ended the investigation. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. Give me just 1 second. Let's see if this will update. And hello to everybody joining us. I see someone I am not familiar with. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. I always like new victims in my crypt. Let us know where you're from, and let me get over here so I can take a look at your comments real quick. If not, I'm going to have to bend up, and my face is going to be all up in yours. So, all right. Let's see what we got here. All right, so with Kyle, let's see. Kyle says, my stepdad Terry saw angels after he drank all my Mountain Dew. Oh, I know who you are, Kyle. Welcome to my stream. Let's see, there we go. There's Kyle. And then we got Miss Delphine. She says, caw. Hello, Delphine. How are you? And then we've got Miss Friday Blue. All right. And then Stephen P. Kitty Cat. Meow, meow. Hello, Stephen. Oh, and Miss Friday Blue had said, I enjoy learning with you today. And she is from Texas. And then we have Miss Beth. Hello, Beth. I have not seen you for a while. And she says, hello, Odd Mother from Canada. Let's see. Let me get this up here. There we go. There we go. All right. So I think we're caught up. I think the Facebook notifications were really weird today. So it's just been me and Miss Friday Blue hanging out. And then Calvin popped in. All right. So let's get back to where we were. What time is it? We need to probably go play a commercial here in a moment. Yeah, let's do that because we're about to get into the London Monster. And the London Monster, I actually know a little bit about this, and it's actually a really interesting story because I think that it was a blend of both actually something was going on and mass hysteria. I think that there was really a perpetrator out there, and sort of like Jack the Ripper, it caused a lot of people to start panicking. And then to add into it some reward money, kind of just got the people that wanted to blame their neighbors involved. So yeah, it's a really interesting story. But let's get to a commercial real quick, and then we'll be right back.
On behalf of our wonderful residents and the Pickwich Chamber of Commerce, welcome to Pickwich, Ohio. Pickwich offers some truly special natural beauty, great lodging and restaurants, unique cultural activities, and of course, plenty of outdoor recreation. We have so much for you to explore in this little slice of paradise. Like our beautiful Ritual Hill, Parcosa Caverns, or Nug Swamp. We can't wait to get a taste of you. So, come on down and visit us. You won't find a friendlier gosh darn little town that's neither here nor there. Anywhere else. Need more information or help planning your next trip? Visit us on the World Wide Web at pickwichohio.com or contact our Visitors Center at 513-278-7701. Hope to have you soon. Yeah.
Hello, all you beautiful people out there. It's your boy Slippy. And when I'm not guzzling down gallons and gallons of amazing ice cream, yes, oh, I love ice cream. Oh, hang on. I'm watching PBDC TV. Now, back to the show, all you beautiful people. And remember, stay nasty.
And we're back. All right. And just to announce, I have got confirmation. I will repeat, I have got confirmation that Pickwitch will be providing some free postcards very, very soon. So it's pickwitchohio.com. Keep your eyeballs open, and there will be a way here very, very soon for you to request your very own Pickwitch postcard be sent to you for absolutely free. So yeah, so there's that. That's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be. I hope they do T-shirts. That would be really cool if they did T-shirts. All right, so let's get back to where we were. Let me just wet my whistle real quick. All right, so the London Monster. Now, in the late 1700s, there was a series of attacks on women in London. Newspapers termed the predator the London Monster. An 18th century stalker. The offender would approach wealthy women from behind, slashing their clothing and stabbing their buttocks. To protect themselves, women wound up wearing copper petticoats or placing copper pots and pans under their dresses. The London Monster attacks continued off and on for 2 years, but the police started to suspect there was something strange going on. Descriptions of the monster varied greatly from attack to attack. Some even added the bizarre detail of knives either attached to some type of almost like brass knuckles, or even to some sort of contraption that was attached to his knees. Now, after 2 years, the attack stopped. Although there was an arrest, historians now wonder if the women were cutting their own clothes and convincing themselves that the monster had harmed them. And this is where I'm saying there's enough evidence in this particular case that there really probably was someone that was doing something, whether it was just some sort of fright tactic or pickpocketing attempts or something along those lines. I don't really know, but I think it was personally, I think it was a mixture of both. Now, centuries later, similar incidences occurred in Halifax, England. Now, on November 16th of 1938, 2 women reported that a stranger with a mallet attacked them. In the next few weeks, more women and several men reported similar attacks, but with a different weapon. Each varying report frustrated the police. Eventually, one of the victims confessed that he had inflicted the wounds on himself. There were a few similar confessions, but many victims insisted that a strange man attacked them. This, however, did not convince the police, so they closed the investigation. Now, the attacker had a signature behavior, and this is kind of going back to the London Monster. The attacker, this is what a lot of, maybe not necessarily historians, but more like psychologists and stuff seem to think, that if it was in fact a real person that was kind of starting this, that he very well could have suffered from, and I hope I pronounced this right, piquerism. It's basically the pricking or stabbing of victims with a knife, pin, or needle. Now, on June 13th of 1790, Anne Porter claimed she had spotted her attacker in St. James Park because she had been attacked previous weeks. And this had gone on for a while before the police had even actually got involved. Because you could actually spend more time, you could actually hang for destruction of clothing than you could for basically attacking a woman. And that particular law was actually put into place really to protect the textile industries so that people didn't come in there and purposefully try to destroy clothing or textiles. But they wound up, whoever was doing this, they were going to charge them with destruction of textiles and clothing rather than actually attacking these women. which is just really bizarre. So anyway, getting back to Ann Porter. So she had been attacked, and then a couple of weeks later, she stated that she had spotted her attacker. Now, her lover, John Coleman, began a slow pursuit of the man, who realized he was being followed. When Renwick Williams, a 23-year-old florist, reached his house, Coleman confronted him, accusing him of insulting a lady, and challenged him to a duel. He eventually took Williams to meet Porter, who fainted when she saw him. Now, Williams protested his innocence, but given the climate of panic, it was futile. He admitted that he had once approached Porter, but had an alibi from another for another one of the for the attacks. Basically, magistrates charged William with defacing clothing. That's what it was called, defacing clothing, and that was a crime that, in the Bloody Code, carried a harsher penalty than assault or attempted murder. Now, during the trial, spectators cheered the witnesses for the prosecution and insulted those for the defense. Now, one of them claimed victims confessed that she had not been attacked. That one of the victims confessed that she had not been attacked at all. Now, the court granted Williams a retrial. In the new trial, Williams' defense lawyer was an Irish poet by the name of Theophilus Swift, whose tactic was basically to accuse Miss Porter of a scheme to collect the reward money. And in a roundabout way, they actually did. And Williams actually had several people, including his boss, that testified that he was at work during a lot of these attacks, especially the one on Miss Porter. Now, like I said, his tactic was to accuse Miss Porter of a scheme to collect a reward. Now, Porter, having basically been engaged to be married to Coleman, who had in fact received some reward money, would basically be the same thing as her being privy to the money, because if she had actually gotten the money and wound up getting married, it would have actually gone to Coleman anyway. So basically, he claimed the reward money. Now, despite the fact that a number of alleged victims gave contradictory stories, and that his employer and coworkers testified that he had an alibi for the most famous attack, Williams was convicted on 3 counts and sentenced to 2 years for each, for a total of 6 years in prison. Now, he did serve that time and wound up being released in December of 1796. Now, historians have speculated whether Williams was in fact the culprit, and have even questioned whether the London Monster existed, which I honestly believe that there was someone. And one of the really weird things about this particular case is that there were about 3 to 4 different descriptions of whoever this attacker was. So it could have been a pickpocket gang. Some of it could have been real, and some of it could have been just like a mass hysteria. But like I said, some people do question whether the London Monster was even existed at all. Now, the reports of monster-like attacks continued to be reported for many years, although they did lessen quite a bit when Williams was in prison. So that is kind of an interesting thing. Now, due to the likelihood that several attackers emulated the original attacker, the London Monster is regarded as possibly one of the first copycat cases. It has also been compared to the Jack the Ripper case, who murdered several prostitutes in London a century later, and also received similar media coverage and press sensationalism. I wouldn't probably go as far as he being compared to Jack the Ripper, being that Jack the Ripper was a little bit more involved with his crime. But it's basically kind of the same thing. Now, this may be a case that a lot of you guys are familiar with, or at least have heard of in passing, and this is the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. He's also known as the anesthetic prowler and the phantom anesthesiast, or simply the Mad Gasser. This was the name given to the person or people believed to be responsible for a series of apparent gas attacks which occurred in Mattoon, Illinois during the mid-1940s. More than 24 separate cases of gassings were reported to police over the span of 2 weeks. In addition to many more were reported sightings of the suspected assailant. The Gasser's supposed victims reported smelling strange odors in their house, which were soon followed by symptoms such as paralysis of the legs, coughing, nausea, and vomiting. Now, no one died or had any serious medical consequences because of these supposed gassing. Now, police remained skeptical of the accounts throughout the entire incident. No physical evidence was ever found, and many reported gassings had simple explanations such as spilled nail polish or odors emanating from animals or local factories. Now, the victims made quick recoveries from their symptoms and suffered no long-term effects. Nevertheless, local news papers ran alarmist articles about the reported attacks and threatened the accounts as fact. The attackers were widely considered to be these particular cases were actually thought to be just mass hysteria, really. However, others maintain that the mad gasser actually did exist, or that the perceived attacks have other explanations, such as some sort of industrial pollution. Personally, I think the mad gasser was probably just a mass hysteria. Now, most contemporary descriptions of the mad gasser are based on the testimony of Mr. and Mrs. Bert Kearney of 1408 Marshall Avenue, the victims of the first Mattoon case to be reported by the media. They describe the mad gasser as being a tall, thin man dressed in dark clothing and wearing a tight-fitting cap. However, another report made some weeks later described the mad gasser as being a female dressed as a man. The mad gasser also was described as carrying a flint gun and as well as agricultural tools for spraying pesticides, which he purposely used to expel the gas. The first of the 1944 mad gasser incidences, like I said, occurred at a house on Grant Avenue in Mattoon on August 31st of 1944. Urban Raef was awakened during the evening hours of the morning by a strange odor. He felt nauseated and weak and suffered from a fit of vomiting. Suspecting that he was suffering from domestic gas poisoning, Reef's wife tried to check the kitchen stove to see if there was a problem with the pilot light, but found that she was partially paralyzed as well and unable to leave her bed. Now, later that night, and this is in parentheses, some contemporary accounts refer to the time as the morning of the following day, a similar incident was also reported by a young mother living close by. She was awakened by the sound of her daughter coughing, but found herself unable to leave her bed. The next day, September 1st, there was a third report incident, and this is the one I was thinking about, and that was by Mr. and Mrs. Kearney of the Marshall Avenue in Mattoon, who reported smelling a strong, sweet odor around 11 p.m. At first, she dismissed the smell, believing it to be from flowers outside of the window. But the odor soon became stronger, and she began to lose feeling in her legs. Mrs. Kearney panicked, and her calls attracted her sister's attention, Mrs. Reddy, who was in the house at the time. Mrs. Reddy also noticed the odor and determined that it was coming from the direction of a bedroom window, which was open at the time. The police were contacted, but no evidence of a prowler was found. Now, at around 12:30 a.m., Bert Kearney, Mrs. Kearney's husband, a local taxi cab driver, who had been absent during the time of the attack, returned home to find an unidentified man hiding close to one of the house's windows. The man fled, and Kearney was unable to catch him. Now, Kearney's description of the prowler was of a tall man dressed in dark clothing and wearing a tight-fitting cap. This description was reported in the local media and became the common description of the mad gasser throughout the Mattoon incident. Now, after the attack, Miss Kearney reported suffering from a burning sensation on her lips and throat, which were attributed to the effects of the gas. Initially, it was suspected that robbery was the primary motive for the attack. At the time of the incident, the Kearneys had a large sum of money in the house, and it was surmised that the prowler could have seen Miss Kearney and her sisters counting it earlier in that evening. Local newspapers incorrectly reported that this incident as being the first gasser. In the days following the Kearney attacks, there were half a dozen similar attacks, though none of the purported victims were able to provide a clear description of the prowler, and no clues were ever found at the scene of the attacks. The first specimen of physical evidence was found on the night of September 5th, when Carl and Beulah Cords of North 21st Street returned home about 10 p.m. After spending a few minutes in the house, they noticed a piece of white cloth slightly larger than that of a man's handkerchief sitting on their porch next to the screen door. Beulah Cords picked up the cloth and smelt it. As soon as she inhaled, she became violently ill. She described the effects as being similar to an electric shock. Her face quickly began to swell. She experienced a burning sensation in her mouth and throat and began to vomit. As with other victims, she also reported feeling weak and experiencing partial paralysis of her legs. Now, Beulah later hypothesized that the cloth had been left on the porch in order to knock out the family dog, which was usually sleeping there, so that the prowler could gain access to the house unnoticed. In addition to the cloth, a skeleton key described as looking well used was reportedly found on the sidewalk adjacent to the porch, along with a large, almost empty tube of lipstick. The cloth was analyzed by the authorities, but they found no chemicals on what could explain Beulah's reaction. The same night, a second incident was reported, this time on North 13th Street, at the house of Mrs. Burnell. She reported seeing a stranger break in through her bedroom window and then attempt to gas her. Now, public concerns over the alleged gassings quickly rose, and the FBI became involved. And the local police issued a statement calling on residents to avoid lingering in residential areas and warning that groups set up to patrol for the gasser should be disbanded for reasons of public safety. Now, during this period, there were also an increase in physical evidences of attacks being reported, ranging from footprints and allegedly being discovered underneath windows to tears being found in window screens. Now, by September 12th, local police had received so many false alarms that they reduced the priority afforded to the gasser reports and announced that the entire incident was likely the result of explainable occurrences exacerbated by public fears and a sign of the anxiety felt by women while local men were they were in service and at war. After the police announcement, gasser reports declined. The only incident of arguably note after that day was the case of Bertha Brunch, who claimed she saw a gasser who was a woman dressed as a man. So that kind of goes over what we would consider mass hysteria. To kind of get into something that's a little more like mass delusions, I do have a couple of tales here. Let me take a look at the comments real quick. Let me pop over here, because it looks like we've got a couple of more. I figure we go over a little bit tonight just because this is going to be my last. Oh, and for you guys still just joining us, this is going to be the last horror gallery stream for the spring season, which means that spooky season is right around the corner. We are taking a summer break so we can go hang out at the beach. And then we will be back fully refreshed for the fall season and spooky season and Krampusnacht and all the really, really fun stuff that we, because that's really like our bread and butter. We love that time of year. And so that's the reason we always take the summer break. But we'll be doing reruns and we'll be popping in randomly to do some things. And I think that we're thinking about just going ahead and do the D&D during that time, because we have had so much on our plate that it's really quality over quantity. But it is there. That is still a show that we are doing. We've just got to find the time to do it. All right, let's see. All right. Oh, so I see a lot of people in here. So I see Mikey, and he says, hello, Mother Delamort. Hi, Mikey. I'm so glad to see you here. And then Alan says, the Mad Gasser is one of my favorite stories. It is an interesting story for sure. It's an absolutely interesting story. And then Frank, I'm telling you, I was nowhere near that lady's house. Hey, Frank, how are you? And then Beth says the gasser was someone who ate a lot of beans. Beans, good for your heart. The more you eat, the more you fart. The more you fart, the better you feel. Beans for every meal. All right, let's see. All right, and then everybody saying hello to everybody. I think I've got everybody. Let's see. No, I did not mention Sasquatch. I did not mention Sasquatch. I don't think I've ever done a feed on Sasquatch. That probably needs to be something that I do when we come back. So, all right. Let me pop out of here. And let's keep going. Because like I said, I've got quite a bit here. So going on more to what we consider mass delusions. And this would be basically a hunt for leprechauns. Yeah, let's see. All right. So the hunt for the Liverpool leprechaun. Now, leprechauns are usually reserved for gaudy St. Patrick's Day celebrations. But in 1964, thousands of children and some adults ventured into Liverpool's Jubilee Park, completely certain that they were going to find leprechauns. The hunt started in June, and by July 2nd, police wearing crash helmets were set up in the park to protect people from each other. The danger of injury was so great that a temporary medical shelter was set up in the park. The leprechaun hunt spread to St. Chad's churchyard before it finally died down. Now, just to kind of explain a little bit, so the difference between hysteria versus delusion. Mass psychogenetic disorder or mass hysteria are terms used to account for physical symptoms. Mass psychosis or mass delusion or psychiatric terms with a medio-legal definition, meaning delusions of one of the prototypical examples of psychosis can be basically defined as fixed and false beliefs. So the hysteria is more the physical manifestation, and the mass delusion or mass psychosis is more of the belief in something. All right, so as far as the leprechaun, now one person did claim at the start of the panic that it was a woman who said that she had seen a weird flying object heading over Liverpool from the direction of Ireland. Another was possibly a man named Brian Jones who was gardening in his district, distinctly dressed in a leprechaun-like clothing when a batch of children called him a leprechaun. Jones then began yelling gibberish and throwing turf, perhaps adding to the fuel of the rumors. And honestly, I like to blame. I want to blame Brian Jones. I really do. I want to think of some old crotchety man dressed up in leprechaun-like clothing, throwing turfs of like grass, and yelling gibberish at children. I mean, that takes up the "Hey kids, get off my lawn" to a completely new level. All right, another like situation where the mass delusion took place actually happened between March and April of 1897. This is called the Edison Star sighting. It was a strange panic that gripped the United States. Thousands of people reported seeing what they called or were calling the Edison Star, a giant apparatus supposedly created by Thomas Edison in an attempt to reflect light from one coast to another. Others thought he was preparing his largest project to date, a giant light bulb that was capable of illuminating the whole country. Neither, of course, were true, but that didn't stop thousands of sightings from being reported across the country. Residents of Portland, Maine, they talked about the electric balloons over their town for days. and another rash of sightings gripped St. Paul's, Minnesota. The rumor had started with one of Edison's Menlo Park experiments, where he sent a balloon into the sky as part of his work with the wireless telegraph. Getting better results at night, he attached a light to each balloon, and the nation's imagination did the rest. The mysterious presence of these balloons, basically with the lights on them, just started the rumors to the giant light bulb or reflecting light from one end of the country to another. All right, so the 1828 hum. The first written account of the presence of an unearthly and persistent hum comes from 1828. Now, travelers making their way through the Pyrenees Mountains wrote about a noise that nearly overwhelmed them when they reached Mount Maladetta. They described it as a low, moaning alio sound, which alone broke upon the deadly silence. The mysterious presence of that low hum has been reported in many places, most famously in Taos, New Mexico. Various investigations have claimed that the hum is everything from an explainable scientific phenomenon to a mass delusion. The idea of the hum has become the stuff of conspiracy theories. But that makes a conspiracy that dates back a surprisingly long time. And I've heard of the hum. I didn't know it was considered the 1928 hum, but I have heard of the hum. Now, this one is pretty freaking funny. And I think this is our last one. The windshield pitting epidemic. Now, residents of California, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, Oregon, Wisconsin, and Washington, this is where there was the most widespread panic, found themselves in the midst of a bizarre phenomenon in 1954. A number of cars' windshields examined by law enforcement had been pitted by some unknown force. Most other outdoor surfaces were unaffected, but thousands of people were suddenly scrambling to examine their windshields and explain what was going on. Now, top secret nuclear testing was soon blamed for the unexplained damage, and rumors began to circulate that the pits were caused by the fallout of nearby H-bomb testings. Some weighed in with more complicated theories, like the idea that nuclear bombs set off underwater through billions of tiny marine creatures into the air, and the impact of their fall pitted the windshield, while others claimed that acid-laced bugs were eroding the glass on impact. However, reports gradually did slow and stopped completely and altogether by the end of that summer. Now, Sigmund Freud was one of the first people to study mass hysteria, and he suggested that mass hysteria, or a conversion disorder, starts as a way to repress memories or emotional events that are going on around you, basically stress. But with the repression of the memory, the person converts the stress into a systematic symptom. It can also be referred to as folie à deux, which is translated to the folly of two or folly of madness. And it doesn't necessarily have to be two, but that's usually what it starts with. 1, 2, and then it spreads. Now, while the exact cause of mass delusions are unknown, the main two, like I said, contributing factors are stress and social isolation. And just to make you feel all nice and warm and fuzzy, mass hysteria and mass delusion can strike anywhere and at any time as long as the conditions are right. And that's what I have for you tonight. So let me pop over to the comments real quick. And you know what? We got that done within an hour. I thought I was going to go over tonight. I had quite a bit of stuff, and we were able to cover that and unpack all that pretty fast. I'm slightly impressed with myself. All right, come on. All right, let's see. Oh my goodness, you guys have been chatty. Wait, what did I put up there? So Mikey is saying, have a nice break, Odd Mother. I absolutely intend to. And then Frank says 2 more episodes of You Can't Sit With Us for this season. So that should take us through June. So that's good to know. And then, like I said, we'll be doing reruns and different things like that. And we will be popping in randomly to just do random stuff. And like I said, I think we're also going to be picking up the Dungeons and Dragons stream during the summer as well. All right. And Alan wants to know if anybody has ever stepped in Sasquatch poo. And Beth is saying, I saw this documentary on my phone about this nanny in England who did some getting rid of babies, baby type of things. Yeah, she was one of the, one of the baby minders. I want to say her last name was Guinness. There were a couple of them. There were some that were moms, there were some that were baby minders, which basically would take in children of like women who had either lost their husband or had babies out of wedlock and things like that. And a lot of times, rather than feed them, which would cost them money, they would just wind up killing them. So yeah, there's several instances of that kind of thing happening. And the Best says she would love to catch a leprechaun. And then Alan says something about Sasquatch throwing turds. And then Beth said, I did a lot of Facebook, take my comment down, but basically the nanny thing was what caused. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I knew what you were saying, Beth. And yes, it did take place during like the 17th and 18th centuries. Oh, that's interesting. So Alan says, let's see, he says in the early 90s, my hometown, Hewleytown, had a strange hum. And then Frank says, Edison was working directly with that damn Sasquatch to poison the country's water supply. I read about it in the National Enquirer. I still like the idea of testing H-bombs underwater and throwing millions of tiny, like, radioactive sea creatures up in the air, and when they come down and hit the windshields, that's what caused the pitting. I think we should blame Brian Jones for that too. And then Alan said, if we had just listened to Tesla, things would have been better. And then Miss Friday Blue says, thank you for the distraction. You are most welcome. And Everett, hello, Everett. He says, good evening, everyone. Hope you were doing well. And I absolutely will, Friday Blue. Going to have an absolutely, yeah, it was Belle Guinness. Yeah, it was Belle Guinness that I think is one of the more famous child murderers or baby murderers. And then Frank says it will be the PBDC&D as well as other RPGs. And those are going to be over on Twitch, just to let you know. So if you like our content and you don't have a Twitch account, go ahead and grab you one and do us a solid and follow us. We're only like, 6 away from a goal that we have set so that we can actually start offering more things to you through Twitch. So we need to get up to 50. And if any of you guys can help us make that happen, that would be absolutely amazing. But we're also going to audio only on the You Can't Sit With Us but we will be releasing the video version 2 weeks later on YouTube. And I think we may do something new and exciting with those as well, but that's going to be an announcement for later. And then again, the RPGs and things like that will be on Twitch. And then most of the other streams will be on all of our platforms, including Facebook and YouTube. We want to give everybody options. And because Facebook is just so hit or miss with the notifications, a lot of people are leaving Facebook too. We want to make sure you guys can find us. And the easiest way to do that is just go to psychobunny.com, or I'm sorry, psychobunnydc.com. And that is our website. You can join our Discord. A lot going on over there at Discord. Suggestions for shows if you would like to each one of your content creators. Just a great way to show support, and that as well is free. But if you are feeling generous, please leave us stars here on Facebook, or you can do a one-time donation or a recurring donation to a content artist of your choosing on their Ko-Fi. And those Ko-Fi links can be found in our coffee shop area on the website. And yeah, Belle Guinness, she was brutal. She was absolutely brutal. Okay. Yeah, and so Frank confirms we are 6 away on Twitch. I know that there's got to be 6 people out there watching that need to go over there and follow us. So, all right. Well, I believe that is it. I am going to go ahead and wish you guys pleasant nightmares. Hope you have a wonderful summer. We will see you back here regularly in the spooky season in September. I cannot wait. And we've got just some really phenomenal stuff planned for you for the fall season. A lot of really fun stuff. So pleasant nightmares, everybody. And I will see you at some time during the summer. But most definitely when we come back in September. Pleasant nightmares, guys.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.